Hola everyone, ¿cómo estás? Buenos días. I know it's already evening dyan sa Manila. Kamusta kayo guys? Eto, sabi natin medyo mag-catch up tayo bago maging super late na dyan. Kamusta kayo? Hola from Ibiza. You can see the Mediterranean region dito. Ayan, pag-usapan natin guys yung mga latest dito sa Pilipinas. Of course, officer in charge, si Sara Duterte, Vice President Sara Duterte, habang nasa abroad po, si Pangulong Marcos Jr. So may mga big statements si Vice President Sara Duterte on issues pertaining to national security. Pag-usapan natin yan. And then of course, natapos na po yung first leg ng first overseas visit, or rather, package of overseas visit by President Marcos. So, pag-usapan din natin yung issue na yan, kamusta yung nangyari sa Indonesia, and then of course, pag-usapan din natin yung things to expect in Singapore. But let me begin with Singapore because I think Singapore is a very, very interesting case. Oh, by the way, mga kameta, nakita niyo naman yung ano natin, di ba? Yung, ano yan? Yung, malakas pa rin yung sound eh. Nakita niyo naman yung ano natin, di ba? Article natin about Estonia. So, we will talk about that more. Pero balikan muna natin itong issue. So, Singapore, of course, pagdating sa Singapore, guys, ayun na, dami naliligo ng chill dito. Pagdating sa Singapore, of course, Singapore is an extremely important country pagdating sa region natin because ang Singapore po ay isa pang other undeclared ally of United States. Sila yung nagbigay ng access sa Amerika pagdating sa littoral combat ships. Singapore has the most developed armed forces in Southeast Asian region by far. And Singapore has been very effective in managing yung relations between US and China, no, over the past half a century, and that explains why Singapore has had relatively stable defense relations with all major powers. So if you want to learn about independent foreign policy, guys, if you want to learn about balancing relations about US and China, if you want to learn about the country that influences the thinking of the Biden administration, among others, on the relations between US and China, Singapore is definitely the country to go to. Not to mention, of course, guys, katulad ng pinag-usapan natin kahapon, pagdating sa major investment inflow, maraming mga malalaking kumpanya, yung mga multinational companies, they have headquarters dyan sa Singapore. And it's actually there from Singapore where they make the region-wide investments across ASEAN sometimes. And of course, Singapore itself has many big companies. And from those big companies, they also make direct investments in other countries. Kaya, for instance, pagdating sa Indonesia, Singapore was the biggest source of investments, foreign direct investments, I think $8 billion or something last year. So, siguro mahalaga dito na pagdating ni President Marcos sa Singapore, he'll have some in-depth, interesting, engaging conversation with Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, outgoing Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, and incoming Prime Minister, if not already, the Prime Minister Lawrence Wong. Sana pag-usapan din yung prospects for getting more investments sa Pilipinas. Singapore could also serve, guys, as a platform for mobilizing private investments dyan sa Singapore, sa Pilipinas. So for instance, the other year, meron effort ang United States, Australia, yung mga country na yan, to set up a kind of mechanisms, financial mechanisms para mag-raise ng funds para pang-compete doon sa Belt and Road Initiative ng China. So Singapore, because of its position, because of its optimal regulatory framework, because of its, of course, relatively huge economy and financial sector, no, it could be very helpful also there. Now, mahalaga yan kasi pagdating kay President Marcos, of course, he has huge infrastructure development plans sa Pilipinas, including yung plan na, of course, mag-develop tayo ng, I think there is an $11 billion Sangli airport project na tinitignan ngayon na multiple consortiums. It's a consortium, so multiple companies are involved there. But ang dami pang ibang projects. Dun sa $100 billion build ni Pangulong Duterte, if you look at it, only a few of them, I think 18 of them, or under 20 of them, right, ay nag-full completion. I'll send the link to that. So a lot of that, no, siguro $70-80 billion of projects have not been finished yet. So those ones have to be finalized. Ayan, yung mga tao dito nag-chill, oh. Habang nag-chill, mga walang yang yan, tayo ay politika ang pinag-usapan. Para mga masarap mag-swimming doon, walang yan. Next time na lang. Yan, balikan natin yan. So yun, guys, ano na, family mode tayo dito eh. Wala na mga party mode, di tayo nagaganyan. Wala na, zaddy na. Yeah, so I think those are the things that we want to look at. Of course, malaki din yung ating OFW community dyan sa Singapore. I'm sure they're very excited to meet President Marcos Jr. and hear about how he's going to strengthen bilateral relations, how he's going to make the Philippines much more competitive economy. Siyempre, yung OFW siguro they want to invest back in the Philippines. They want to be, some of them may want to relocate, some of them who have businesses abroad may want to branch out or expand yung economic presence nila across the region. So there's much to talk about. Not to mention, of course, Singapore is also a key member of ASEAN. So when it comes to South China Sea disputes, when it comes to code of conduct negotiations sa West Philippine Sea, among others, we can also have a lot of coordination with Singaporeans on that front. So mahalaga lahat ng mga bagay niyan. So that's why I'm saying maganda na pinili ni President Marcos Jr. dun sa first visits niya itong dalawang bansa na talagang central pagdating sa regional leadership at regional institutions, etc. So of course kasama din dyan yung trade and development, kasama din dyan yung strategic and defense issues, yung West Philippine Sea. So let's look at all of that. And the other thing I want to talk about also, guys, here is I hope the Philippines under President Marcos Jr. will also be more assertive in terms of our leadership within ASEAN, no? Parati ko sinasabi na ang Pilipinas po ay hindi maliliit na bansa. Ang Pilipinas po is the second largest populous country pagdating sa population dito sa ASEAN. At in terms of GDP, we're in the top 4. And hopefully down the road, number 2 tayo behind Indonesia. Those are the trend lines for us. And isa tayo sa mga founding members ng ASEAN. So I think it makes perfect sense if President Marcos, just like back in the day, no? To assert our leadership with ASEAN and to underscore yung fact na ang Pilipinas po is it could be de facto a proactive middle power. Hindi lang tayo small power, but middle power, a country that actively contributes to regional peace and security. So, yan ang mga bagay na gusto kong makita dito sa mga regional diplomacy ni President Marcos Jr. and all Filipino presidents henceforth. So, this is not about one president or the other. This is about asserting the Philippines' position within the regional regional geopolitical landscape. Yan. Nadidistract ako kasi dami ng mga nag-relax-relax dito balik na lang kaya ako mamaya. Sabi ko, mag-walk-walk lang tayo dito eh. Yeah, I need to walk para mag-exercise tayo. Now, the other thing though is, sarap kasi ng yung luto ng cousin ko. Ang laki ng kinain namin paella kahapon. Hanggang ngayon, parang busog pa ako eh. Nag-guilty tuloy ako. Ayan naman tayo. Hindi ko siya sinisisi, sinasabi ko lang. Siyempre kasi chef yung natin, cousin natin dito, kaya pag nagluto yan, mahirap mag-control ng sarili. Shoutout naman dyan sa cousin natin, si Marco. Alright, next time samahan natin. Wala, busy sila eh. Dami pa rin mga turista dito yata. Ayan, mga Espanyol. Okay. So, eto, tignan natin ano mga lalabas dun sa visit sa Singapore. Now, let's go through the Indonesia visit na nakakatapos pa lang. O, yan talagang, nakita niyo talaga na sariling sikap talaga to. Sariling sikap to. Labas natin mga data. So, we finalized a number of deals, guys. So, dito makikita niyo mga deals na na-finalize under President Marcos pagdating sa kanyang pagbisita sa Indonesia. Parati ko sinasabi na mahalaga yung issue ni Miss Veloso, yung humanitarian case na yan. But I think it's also important to look at the broader gambit of our bilateral relations. So nagkaroon po ng meeting si President Jokowi and President Marcos. As you remember, the last time there was a Philippine president who made a major visit to Indonesia, it was President Duterte, of course, and very warm yung kanilang interactions and all. So mukhang very good din yung exchanges between the two leaders. So sabi ni Widodo, sabi ni President Marcos, we continue to work on growing our relationship to making it stronger, so much so that in actual fact our discussions progress so rapidly that we, the President and I, have agreed to organize task forces already to meet and discuss even at the technical level. So may mga plan of action. So meron tayong 2022 to 2027 Plan of Action sa pagitan ng Indonesia at Pilipinas. So kasama dyan yung ito yung mga agreements na overseen ng Department of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Secretary natin, Secretary Manalo. And these areas of plan of action, no, ang kino-cover niya ay security, border management, counterterrorism, maritime, economic, energy, culture, education, labor, health, and consular matters, among others. So, yung agreements na sinayin ay agreement on cooperative activities in the field of defense and security. So, between National Defense of the Philippines and Ministry of Defense of Indonesia, this agreement is referred to as the pillar of the two countries' defense and military partnership. So, enhanced collaboration po ang tinitignan natin, including pagdating sa defense cooperation, further promoting the conduct of cooperative activities and reinforcing the modernization of the Philippine military. So, pagdating sa Indonesia, in fairness, may mga ginagawa sila ng mga warships at barko. At Indonesia also is, of course, the largest archipelagic country. They have a lot of experience in terms of maritime patrolling. They're also developing their naval capabilities and maritime security capabilities. So, perhaps there's a thing or two we can learn from them. Not to mention, dun sa maritime affairs department nila, at minister nila before, si Susi, meron silang policy na parang blow up the illegal boats, no? So kung may illegal boats na galing sa China, Vietnam, etc., kina-confiscate at biniblow up para hindi na sila babalik. So there are a thing or two we can also pick up from the Indonesians in terms of defending yung pagdepensa nila sa kanilang karagatan. There are also, of course, MOU between the National Commission of Culture and Arts and Minister of Education of Culture and Research and Technology ng Indonesia. So hopefully we can have more exchanges between our top universities, between our educational institutions, among others. Now, medyo ang hinahanap ko sana doon is more on the economic fronts. Katulad ng sinabi natin, Indonesia is a big country, 270, 280 million people, 50 to 100 million people in terms of middle class, consumer class, depending on how you classify the middle class and consumption patterns and thresholds. So, yung mga malalaking kumpanya dito sa Pilipinas, or sa atin sa Pilipinas actually, have a lot of room also for expanding the markets beyond the Philippines as they become globally competitive. Sabi na nga natin, yung export between Indonesia and the Philippines is very limited. But sana yung export natin sa Indonesia is very limited compared to what they export to us. So sana we can look at certain sectors where we have comparative advantage and expand on that. So, President Marcos said that actually his visit to Indonesia produced more than what he expected. So, medyo happy siya. But as I said, no, so sabi ni President Marcos, the visit was more productive than expected. No, so far so good. The things that we plan to talk about with President of Indonesia, Jokowi, the subjects that we expect to be raised, we did, but we went beyond the plan. We started talking about other things. Now, what we don't know is if his other things as much cover, of course, sensitive issues, no? Yung case ni Ms. Veloso, of course, this is one of the more prominent issues affecting bilateral relations. I'm not sure if President Marcos raised that at all, but maybe behind the scenes, maybe through the corridors of diplomacy, na-raise na issue na yan. Now, mukhang one area where President Marcos has been quite happy is in terms of the energy sector and agricultural development sector. So I think this is where we're looking at improving agreements on the fisheries front. In terms of agriculture, also I think we can look at a thing or two. Now, I remember very well, a few years ago when I was in Indonesia, I met their parang minister for rural development, no? So may magandang polisiya dun sa Indonesia whereby they have a minister na in charge dun sa rural development para yung development ng big cities at saka yung mga rural areas hindi gano'ng kalaki yung agwat. So there was a very conscious effort for 3 to 5 years of really focusing on enhancing basic infrastructure in the agriculture, in the rural areas, enhancing your access to education, to healthcare, etc. In fact, I met the minister, I interviewed him, I cited him in some of my works. There's also a very good article on Bloomberg that also covers huge gains that the Jokowi administration made, especially during its first term in office, in terms of rural development and closing the gap between urban areas and rural areas. So I think there's something that we can learn from Indonesia on that front, because President Marcos, of course, as the Agriculture Secretary, has really focused on land reform, on agricultural productivity, dun sa kalagayan ng ating mga magsasaka, yung issue ng poverty, of course, in the rural area, which is tied to agricultural sector natin and the need to develop that. I think there's a thing or two we can also learn from Indonesians. and we can have some very productive discussions and exchange of best practices with them, no? The other thing na, ito yung katulad ng pinag-usapan natin kanina, mukhang ayon kay President Marcos, there were discussions on the involvement of Indonesian companies, major Indonesian companies, sa infrastructure projects natin, most especially public-private partnerships, no? So I think he said the most extensive subject matter was in fact PPP, public-private partnership, because we are here to encourage PPPs with the Philippine government, but not only for the Philippines government. Aside from the PPP, we'll talk about the joint venture of businesses here. They will come to the Philippines. Filipino businessmen come to Indonesia for joint ventures, but also to do business with the government. So I think that's, in fairness, there was some move on that front. Itong nga sinasabi ko, relatively maliit yung trade natin. So the trade volume between the two countries totaled $9.5 billion last year, but 8.6 billion of which represented Indonesia's exports. So wala pang 1 billion export natin sa kanila, no? So this is quite a problematic situation. So I think we have to really get to the bottom of this. I think Indonesia is an under-tapped market for Filipino companies and conglomerates. We also have fintech companies that are they're increasingly international. I think we can get involved there in Indonesia, and vice versa. Their Gojek and some of their world-class fintech companies also can get involved in the Philippines. But today, at tomorrow siguro makikita din natin yung mga concrete agreements na sana makuha natin out of our relationship with Singapore. I think that would be also very, very interesting. Wait, ang napakainit pala dito sa ganitong oras. These people are chilling, huh? Yep, relax. Parang nainggit ako bigla. Ngayon, maglakad muna ako. Kailangan ko I need to get back in shape because sa grabing travel schedule ko at saka yung mga working schedule, ganun. Kahit nandito nga ako, nag-work tayo, di ba? Meta and all of that. Tsaka yung mga classes ko, inaayos ko lahat, yung mga syllabus, mga meetings, etc. So, I'm just trying to make the most out of whatever little free time we have here. Alright, thank you guys. Now, I want to talk more about actually yung case ng also Vice President Sara Duterte calling for a tougher stance on issues like terrorism and criminality. And I think that the stark contrast with the rhetoric of President Marcos and the emphasis on these issues by Duterte rather than Marcos also say something about the internal dynamics in the government, the potential incongruities pagdating sa prioritization, because President Marcos seems to be very focused on economic development. That's really the primary issue he's focused on. While it seems for the Dutertes, iba yung mga priorities nila. One of their priorities is really on the issues of going after NPA, terrorism, security, etc. So let's look at that. That's a very, very interesting development. But I was thinking maybe this is something that we better leave for discussion separately at hindi yung habang distracted ako dito looking at all of this. Yan, chill tayo dyan. Yeah, those people are having fun. Although hindi kasing ganda yung beach nila katulad ng Pilipinas, to be honest. But, yeah, at least for Europeans, this place is a fun place, yeah. Sige guys, parang na ako Nainggit ako dun sa iba, nag-relax lang dito. Balik pa ako, mahabol pa ako sa work eh. Ayaw ko pang inaayos kanina. Alright, let me just say thank you to you guys. I cannot see it. Last time, the sun is too strong. Yeah, let me say thank you guys sa inyo, dun sa mga been so kind and supportive. Thank you dun sa mga nagbigay ng comments, ng stars. Thank you kay Elizabeth Palacos, kay Rizal Reyes, kay Mitch Tengcho. Thank you very much. Kay Margaret Rodriguez, kay June Haji, thank you so much. Kay Mimi Gomban, kay Michelle Molina, kay Rian Tante, yan, kay Maria Esmeralda, yan, as always, thank you so much again. Also kay Ma'am Jocelyn, at kay Ma'am Victoria Baltazar. Thank you so much guys dun sa mga nagbigay support and star and all. Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure now we can squeeze in some meta here and then while trying to streamline our schedules. At least kagabi for the first time, first time in days, medyo matinong sleep na naman tayo. So at least maybe it's time to get some exercise and energy done. Thank you guys. I really appreciate you guys joining us, sharing your ideas and comments. Yan. And grabe mga the moves. Di na ako mag-the moves dito. Baka pag mag-the moves ako, iba yung baka may pumatol, wag na. Ano tayo dito? Wholesome tayo, wholesome. Family mode tayo. Chill lang. Nag-work pa nga tayo. Walang yan. Balik nga ako sa bahay. Chill-chill naman. Nadi-distract ako dito. Parang sarap din maligo ah. See you guys. Talk to you soon, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Hasta mañana, as I said, probably we have to sit down and have a proper discussion also in this Duterte Marcos thing. I think it's quite an interesting thing to look at, no? And there's much to learn from that. All right, have a good day. God bless. Take care. Take care. Hasta mañana. At saka yung ROTC, yung ROTC, ito na naman. Ang sagot sa kahirapan, sa education crisis natin, ROTC. Of course, pag-usapan din natin, ay nako, ang laki ng mga confidential budget, etc. Alright, have a good day. Ingat. See you.